Hello, beautiful friends. We have a great story today about inflammatory arthritis reduction. Our guest is Mike from the UK, and he has been extremely methodical and disciplined with his approach to inflammation reduction. And we have lots to learn from him, and we're going to dedicate a lot of time in this episode listening to his advice and suggestions about all the things that worked for him. And it's going to be fun. So thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thank you, Clint. So I guess in terms of the journey today, to keep it brief, started with ongoing back pain, which lasted, was going on for maybe around a year or so. And it got to the point where physios didn't seem to be able to kind of course correct anything. And one in particular suggested, I think you should see a rheumatologist. There's a few things that are, I guess cropping up, and I think that's a good path. I guess fast forward, once in the rheumatologist's office, blood test, and progression of pain and inflammation into, I think, 14 joints in
Wow.
total. Was bedbound, couldn't really, dress myself, really struggling to walk and the like. So found the Paddison program, made some very drastic changes in terms of lifestyle, a very gradual and slow return to exercise, and I'm just over, I'd say, 18 months, and I'm blood markers are down from CRP 65.8, I think it was, to 0.7, and cleared all of the inflammation from my body. I've got some kind of residual tendinitis that I'm working through with my Achilles, and but drug free and kind of feeling like myself again.
That is amazing. It's the sort of thing that you just, in the medical community, you just never hear, right? And so whilst in our community and over the years of sharing, stories on this podcast, we've heard, quite a lot of stories like this, but the medical community, this is still like a blue moon kind of experience. But what we're going to cover next in listening to you is that this was all very, very, very laid out like a mission. Your documentation inside the support forum, which is where we first connected, it makes for very interesting reading as I went back going through before we started today. Do you have a science background or a sort of an engineering background? Because the way that you sort of planned out everything looked like you had a sort of a very logical brain.
I don't. I think secondary school science is probably the extent of it. But yeah, maybe I bring that into my work. But yeah, I think for me, I like to have a plan. And I think from, the moment of diagnosis, it's, of course, a bit of a shock to the system. But I think the best way of then, thinking about how to move forward is, okay, what's the plan? And what do I need to now do over the next, 24 hours, the next week, the next month, and so on.
Right. Okay. So let's move through your story fairly quickly, because I want to get to I want to tap your brain on some things that are actionable for people. just over a couple of minutes or so, just share. You did start methotrexate in parallel to the lifestyle changes, and you're recently off methotrexate after a sort of a tapering process. Tell us about the methotrexate experience that you had.
Mm-hmm. So I guess it started with when I was originally in with the rheumatologist. See, I'd been having back and my SI joint were really giving me some grief, and then it started to spread to my knees. And at the time, I was just on an anti-inflammatory, atorecoxib, it's called, and the rheumatologist was kind of floating the idea of methotrexate, and here's some leaflets to take away. It should be your choice, but you need to know the side effects and some potential implications of going on to it. So it doesn't make for great reading, and I absolutely was intent on avoiding it. And within a couple of weeks, really, from getting the leaflets, kind of all hell broke loose. Essentially, knees just kind of blew up like watermelons. Just my elbow the same. I had PMJ issues with my jaw, so I couldn't eat and could barely open my mouth to brush my teeth. And I had inflammation in my kind of sternum, sternoclavicular joint, I think they call it. So yeah, was in a bit of a mess, and had a blood test, and this was kind of before the Christmas period, 2021. And then I had an appointment with the rheumatologist kind of first sort of week back in January. And she said, "How are you feeling?" And I was like, not good. Christmas has been rough. I was pretty much laid up most of that Christmas and New Year. And she said, "Well, your bloods have gone through the roof, and methotrexate now, it can't really be a discussion. You need to get onto it, because we just cannot sort of suppress that level of inflammation through anything other than a disease modifier." So I kind of reluctantly said, okay, because I was in a bit of a state, and started with 10 milligrams for the first, I think it was like 3 weeks, and then up to 20 milligrams for, pretty much just over a year.
Okay. And what was the tape? How did it make you feel? Was it effective? And what was the tapering process like?
Yeah, so I think I started at a time when I think the disease was really kind of active. So I didn't notice any particular change. And if anything, I was getting worse. But appreciated that I think it takes a good few weeks to really start getting into your system anyway. I think so. I took it every Wednesday, and noticeable that on a Thursday I would feel pretty rough, a bit. Sometimes I'd have stomach pain and kind of brain fog. I don't know. I just didn't feel sharp, and didn't really feel myself at work, and really just wanted to. I think that was maybe one of the real influences on me thinking about, I can't be on this for forever. I need to look at alternatives and drug free kind of therapy to really dial up and kind of shift the needle. So Yeah, and I guess we can talk about that in terms of the tapering. So I after at the end of the summer last year, I was starting to see some real improvement from a lot of the exercise, and certainly kind of dietary changes, strength back. And I actually did some research as well, because I think my blood markers were falling. So that was all heading in the right direction. But I was getting tendonitis in a lot of the joints where I'd had, the real sort of high inflammation and kind of synovitis. But I don't think, and obviously I'm no doctor, so don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that methotrexate's kind of effectiveness on tendonitis is next to nothing. So I think that prompted me to be like, well, if it's not going to solve for the tendonitis, then maybe I need to be thinking more about sort of upping the resistance training and loading through tendons and stuff like that to kind of be the route out. So I started tapering. I didn't want to just drop it completely, because of course I'm sure it played a huge part in bringing my inflammation down. So I started tapering 2.5 milligrams I think it was every 4 weeks, and just continually did that. Maybe that was a bit too fast. I've heard other people, taking it a little slower, but that took me up until about a month ago, where I finished taking it, and the last sort of 4 weeks I've been drug free.
And you haven't noticed anything since you started tapering several months ago?
No, nothing.
Let's talk about diet and exercise, and let's enter in straight into this category of like what I mean. You mentioned that the drug played a role, but what else was crucial to be getting you into a position where now you're not taking the drug, but you're in a wonderful position compared to before taking the drug, in a nightmarish position, because something's changed internally. Obviously, the drug will assist in getting some symptoms down, but as you know, if you're only looking at it from that position, that's not going to fix the underlying cause. The other sources of inflammation relief have apparently done that. So let's talk diet, exercise, and everything else that you did. Tell us what to do.
So diet was a drastic change. I was a big, meat eater, loved the steak, loved the burger, loved, I guess, a lot of just really bad foods, chips. And I think I'm one of those that I've always exercised a lot, so I've been able to kind of get away with maybe not having the best diet, and maybe not seeing the effects of it. Obviously, I think I've paid for it, maybe with it contributing to this, but I shifted pretty much overnight from that sort of diet to whole food, plant-based. Obviously, so followed the Paddison program to the absolute letter. So started with the 2-day juice cleanse, and then on to the baseline, which, in the depths of winter, I think it was January when I started, it was rough. But, I think we have choices every single day of everything. There's so many like scenarios that are thrown our way, and I think with just that change and choosing to kind of nourish my body with greens and leaves. I mean, that felt like the extent of it for a good few weeks. I just felt like I was doing the right thing. So obviously it's a kind of staged program. So, you've got something to look forward to, and you've just got to kind of get your head down and plow through. Certainly, I think it's those first few weeks, which are fairly limited. So from there, started, I guess, systematically adding, new foods, waiting, seeing if there was a reaction, add something else. And, right up until the sort of 180-day mark or 90 days or whatever, and just gradually doing that. And yeah, obviously completely cut out oils and alcohol, any processed food, anything like that. And yeah, that was kind of maybe the first 6 months was really strict. And then I think from there we had a few holidays that came up. We booked them, and I was nervous, about traveling, and would there be places that would cater for me, or even places that would have like a vegan or plant-based diet menu. But through research and just a bit of planning before we went away, we've absolutely been able to find places, and there's stuff that unfortunately you've just got to miss out on. And I think, having been through what I've been through and the level of pain, it's very easy to pass up on anything and just think, do you know what? Once upon a time, I would have loved that and got stuck right in. But do you know what? I'll sit here with my salad and enjoy it, and know that I'm hopefully not going to be in pain tomorrow. So yeah, I've continued with that. Definitely have.
How far have you gotten with the reintroductions? Like, are you now eating like potatoes, corn, a whole bunch of different starchy based foods, beans, lentils, and lots of things like this?
Yeah, pretty much all of that, and a lot of variety. So I'm pretty intentional about every day trying to get as much variety in, kind of along the lines of Dr. Greger's sort of advice. And yeah, it seems to have done the job, as I've gone back fairly kind of intently into the exercise space. I've been supplementing with a plant-based protein, which is completely derived from vegetables, and pretty clean, and no. Yeah, and that's one thing I've really noticed. I look at the back of everything, and if there's a word I can't pronounce or numbers where there should be foods,
Numbers.
I'm just like, no thanks.
That's great. I love it. Yeah. That's funny. All right, let's talk exercise, and then I'll get you to sort of rattle off other things that have helped you. But I loved what you said around the tendonitis and the methotrexate. I've not researched that, but intuitively that would seem to make sense. So yes, I don't know, but if you've seen that somewhere, I mean, intuitively that would make sense. So what we do know is that exercise does reduce tendonitis when it's done correctly. It's kind of one of these, it needs to be a gradual thing. I've found that I get tendonitis in both elbows if I'm not careful, because as I push things at the gym with monkey bars and things like this, that if I'm not careful, that I develop tendonitis, and then I go back and I have to do sort of a rehab routine on my elbows, which is some simple exercises, and just to get things settled again, which work very effectively. So I love exercise as a way to reduce inflammation in the joints. We just go straight for the target. So which exercises did you use for which joints, and what worked?
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like this is a big topic.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I played football for, I don't know, since I was 8 years old, and exercise has always been such a huge part of my life. And to go from still up until everything sort of I started falling apart, I was still playing football. So yeah, it was always kind of, for me, one of the most important things to get back exercising and feeling myself again. But I knew it was going to be a bit of a journey. So I was seeing a physio, and just thinking back now, I'd go in to see her, and she'd just almost be in despair. Like, I actually just don't know what to do with you. So we got to a stage where she was just advising me on exercises to do in a swimming pool. So like hydrotherapy, because I couldn't walk, I couldn't straighten my legs, where the inflammation was so bad. And just by being in the pool and walking up and down and kind of moving my joints through a range of motion, one just, I don't know, kind of made me feel like I was doing something. But it was, I think for me, just more about starting to set a routine, because I think had I gone straight into the gym, as I started to kind of rehabilitate, it would have been a little demoralizing just not being able to do anything in there. And so I started with that kind of hydrotherapy, would just go, every day to the gym. And luckily enough, it has a swimming pool. At that time as well, I'd lost like over 10 kilos in the space of probably 4 or 5 weeks. I think the inflammation was just sort of eating me up. Constantly waking up in the night, sweating, and and I think obviously moving to a fairly restricted diet in those initial stages, the weight just fell off me. So I'm walking up and down this swimming pool, like a bag of bones, feeling a little bit useless, to be honest. But it was sort of a means to the next step. So the next step from there was starting to do hot yoga. So it's not a Bikram class in particular, but they do hatha, and then there's like vinyasa as well. But I kind of joined those hatha classes, and I don't know, I just kind of felt like just being in there, it was warm enough that you'd start to work up a bit of a sweat. I couldn't do everything, but I, do some modifications and variations of stuff. And again, that was like, okay, I'm doing something here. And I do remember just lying in a class and just, I don't know, barely being able to get back up. They're like, get down lie on your back, and I don't know, close your eyes for 30 seconds, and then we'll meet in a seated position. And I can't get up. And it was one of those that was really humbling, just not, like, at the time, 33 years old. I should be in the peak of my physical sort of existence, and I can't get up off the floor. So I knew that it was just patience and persistence. So I was probably doing maybe 5 classes a week, and then going in the pool afterwards, and then that was kind of the pattern for maybe 2.5 months, and then it was time to get back in the gym, and my knees were still in really bad way, but the stationary bike was kind of the first thing that I kind of gravitated towards. So it was almost embarrassing. I could barely put like bend over to tie my feet into the pedals. And then once I did that, I'd maybe do, I don't know, like 600 meters, and then I'd be like, this is enough, kind of thing. And then slowly building it up, and there's kind of like these I don't know, they're a bit more basic stationary bikes, and in the gym that I go to, and then there's a whole kind of section of, they're called watt bikes. So that they essentially are the closest thing to a road bike. I think they were developed by like the GB cycling team, and there would always be classes going on. I'm sat on this bike, doing barely any distance, at no resistance, but watching this like pack of gym goers sweating away and powering through this class. And straight away I was like, that's a goal. I need to be doing that class and in there, and that's something to aim towards. So from there, gradually building up the distance and the resistance on the bike, I just found it to be such a breakthrough for my knees in particular. But I think just it was the first time I was really starting to sweat. As I started to kind of push past the kind of 10K mark, I sort of felt like, okay, it was almost like the sweat is like the disease kind of coming out of you, sort of thing. So and before this call, I've literally just walked in from one of those watt bike classes, which I've been doing, bless you, for I don't know, probably the last sort of 9 months or so now. And it's just kind of been a game changer, I think. So the cycling's been really important. In terms of resistance training, I think that's been equally important, but started again very slow. I think I was doing, I had a stack of cushions on the sofa in our living room, and I would just sort of try and get up off them and then come back down, and I'd do that 10 times, and then I'd do another 10, and then I'd do another 10, and then I'd realize, okay, I did too much. So you need to kind of find that balance. And I think you very quickly start to learn when you do overdo it and you start to aggravate things. But I found those helpful just to start to build some strength back, because when I lost all of that weight, I lost a lot of muscle mass as well. And I think trying to just stick to some like functional movement was a priority. So tendinitis, and well, I had real bad inflammation in my right elbow. Could barely, hold a cup with, water in it. It was that bad, and through a lot of the kind of push exercises, the sort of, I started with the like the machines in the gym. I wasn't really doing free weights because I felt like a bit more supported with the like the machine chest press in particular, and started again with like 5 kilograms or something like measly like that, and just pushing through that range of motion, and again maybe doing too much, realizing, and then kind of coming back again. But I think after sort of learning that a few times, realizing that, okay, I'm not what I once was in terms of strength, and it's a process to get back to it. So incrementally started building it up, and as I started to feel stronger, moved on to more free weights and bench pressing and squatting. Again, kind of sticking to all functional movement, pull-ups. Really trying to not put my joints into any sort of awkward positions. You see some people in the gym doing some pretty remarkable things that don't look like your body is made to do. Just basically stuck to the basics, and it seems to have treated me well. And I think both the cycling and resistance training has probably been or had the biggest impact for me.
And what are you capable of now with the resistance training, and also with the stationary bike? I mean, you mentioned pull-up. You mentioned pull-ups. That's piqued my interest because they are normally reserved for the sort of upper level of physical ability of people at the gym, not people who have only a year and a half ago been, absolutely crippled. So that's incredible. So I just want to see just how far you've come.
Yeah. So in terms of the resistance training, so I'm probably squatting my body weight, so around 75 kilos. The chest, like bench press, around 90 kilos. And then in terms of cycling, I may be doing 80k, 80 kilometers a week. And I've got a race or a ride coming up at the end of May, which is 100 miles. So I'm kind of training for that. And there's a group of us doing it. So again, another goal to kind of set. Doing some fairly kind of significant distance now on the bike.
And that's obviously a road race, right? So you'll be out in a pack of people doing did you say 100 or 80 mile?
100 miles.
100 mile. Yeah. So 100-mile race. Is this going to be the first actual road race, or have you been practicing for these as well with your team?
So it will be the first road race. It's not much of a team. It's just a couple of mates, but we'll be dressed up like a team. Let's put it that way.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So, the transformation as I listen to this is absolutely insane. So you've gone from struggling to do anything other than move your body slowly through a pool to now about to ride a 100-mile race, and you're doing pull-ups, very impressive the squats, bench press at the gym, no pain, no drugs. I mean, when you hear that sort of stated back like that, I mean, how do you reflect on this transformation?
um, I, I'm so grateful, and I think you you really put things into perspective when you go through something like that. And I'd just, I don't know, find myself just smiling about being able to just go for a cycle and not be in pain. And yeah, it's pretty incredible what it does to you mentally as well, both when you're going through it, but then in hindsight, kind of looking back. So yeah, feel great that I've come out the other side, but equally know that the job's not done, and there's still a lot of kind of consistency that needs to be lifelong now. And I think, I don't know if maybe you could go as far as saying it's kind of a blessing in disguise because of the change to my lifestyle. And I think for my overall health and maybe longevity, I might have done myself a few favors. Who knows? I could get hit by a bus next week, so you never know. But I do think it had a pretty big impact on me. And yeah, I also don't want to get carried away because there's still some goals that I've got set for this year. And obviously, like I mentioned, I've got those couple of sort of niggling issues, like with my Achilles and my peroneal tendon on the kind of outside of it kind of runs from the outside of your leg down to the side of your foot, sort of around your ankle. So just those two. And I've gone to see a new physio, someone who's a specialist in like foot and ankle and tendon issues. And he seems to think, I just saw him this week, he seems to think that I could be, running within the next 3 months. So that's a real, that's a huge goal for me. I had to stop playing football when this all started, and I've still got my football boots in the back of the car. And every time I open the boot of the car, I see my football boots, and I've not thrown them out. And I've said I'm not retiring from football unless it's on my terms. So they will stay in the back of the car until I'm able to play a game again. And that might be the last game I ever play. But yeah, I purposely have left them in the back of my car. Just as another reminder, every time I open it, it's like, okay, if you want to play football again, no messing around and stick to what's working.
Well, a couple of suggestions and a warning. When I first developed symptoms for rheumatoid and I had not yet been to the rheumatologist, I had the painful feet, stiffness in my body, and I hadn't played touch rugby or touch football, if we want to confuse our audience with the word football, but touch rugby, let's say, in probably like 6 or 7 years. And so I was just turned 31. And all my buddies from college, and let's get a touch football team going again. And of course, I used to actually captain our college team. And so I said, oh yeah, I haven't played since the last saw you guys. Let's get into it. And I'd only been on the field for about 10 minutes, and I tried to sidestep someone and blew my ACL. And they could hear the pop from the sideline. It was just awful. And that in combination with my the beginning of RA symptoms put me in a terrible way. It was like the worst possible start. So so that I don't think will happen because you've been training, and I hadn't been exercising much in the years leading up to that, but you've been training and developing leg strength and stability and so on. So just first of all, take it easy. And then my suggestion, because I was thinking, as you were saying, might be to treat it like you did when you were onboarding your exercise for the first time. Maybe just come on as a substitute and play for 5 or 10 minutes and then sub yourself back off again. And in that 5 or 10 minutes, you'll probably get 80% of the joy that you would have if you'd played the whole game with only a fraction of the risk of injury or post-game problems. And then you say, next week, I'm going to substitute myself on for 12, 15 minutes, right? And do it the same way you did with your exercise. Just ramp up the minutes.
Yeah. But again, it's something that I've got an eye on, but I'm in no rush. I've waited this long, so it can wait.
Yeah. It's becoming apparent that you do like to set goals and visualize things and play the mental side of this pretty well. Are there other things within that category that you can share with us that have worked or that feel like they work, like the football boots in the back of the car? Are there other things like you've mentioned, like observing the pack of warriors on their bikes and wanting to be there and visualizing that? Other things along these lines?
I think creating habits and behaviors was something, even when I started going back to the gym, I wasn't really doing a huge amount, but I think the routine of, just getting up out of the flat and getting out and going there, regardless of, the weather or how tired I was, it just had to be done. And I think that there are things that just have to become non-negotiable, and other stuff has to go by the wayside. Like with the diet, and I think having a strong sort of support system around you, people that are going to, help you in that and accommodate things and understand if you can't, go out for dinner for somebody's birthday, and all of that stuff that, of course, I'd love to be doing, but I'm on a mission here, so I'm sorry. I'll see you at the next birthday. And you kind of have to just get a bit selfish, as as much as people don't want to be that person, you kind of have to put yourself sort of front and center. And I think having, that support, a partner that, was just there, who actually, I've got to say, was an absolute dream. She went vegan the day that I did and was like, I'm in this with you. She didn't do like the juice cleanse and all the baseline or anything like that, but it just makes it so much easier. And helping with, obviously, like preparing meals, but looking at recipes for things, and getting creative with how we could do like a sweet potato curry, for example. And those sorts of things really helped. I think having the understanding that things will get better, and I think recognizing when you've achieved something, even when it's really small, I think can do just so much for like your mental well-being and help you realize that there is a way out. And whilst it won't all come at once, it might be, okay, I'm feeling a bit of an improvement in my finger. That's great. And I think it helps as well when, you're putting the hours in and the sort of hard graft, and there'd be times where I'm like close to being sick on that bike, because of how intense it is, and all I'm thinking about is, well, think how good I'm going to feel this time next year, and that's just what gets me through it. So I think recognizing those sort of small wins and helping them fuel your kind of ongoing work that needs to go in, and I think that's it. You just got to have the mindset of, this isn't easy, and no one's going to do it for you. And my experience with the sort of healthcare system, and some physios that I've seen, it's quite transactional. You're in, there's a moment in time, they assess you and make a recommendation, and then you're gone. So then for the rest of that month, maybe, or 2 weeks until you see them again, no one else is there to kind of coach you through anything. And I think the research and purposefully educating myself on, first, what the hell is this? I remember when that physio said you need to go and see a rheumatologist, I was like, I don't even know what a rheumatologist is, or what they specialize in. And I think really getting to grips with the disease, and of course, the internet can be a great place full of amazing things. It's where I discovered the Paddison program, which I'm truly grateful for. But there's so many almost bordering sort of poisonous forums where all people do is talk about how terrible their life is, and how they're, I don't know, maybe in a wheelchair, and you're reading this stuff and thinking, oh God, like this cannot be happening to me. So I've really drifted towards the science and the fact behind everything, and I've not been a part of any. I mean, I don't have Facebook and don't really use social media a huge amount, but a lot of people said you should join a forum and you can talk about your experience with other people. And I don't know, I don't want to talk about how rough I feel, and I don't really want to hear about how rough other people are feeling, because it's not benefiting. Some people I think maybe do, in terms of getting stuff off their chest. I don't. I'm not that sort of person, and I think action is what really kind of really drives me. So yeah, I think, of course, there are some things that will feel maybe intuitive to be doing, but through the research and hearing from people like yourself and other people, whether it's on podcasts or on YouTube, you can really get to, I guess, the end goal quicker, because you're learning from other people's experiences, ways that they've overcome things. You're thinking about the anatomy, how your muscles connect with your tendons to your bones. And, it's all of that sort of stuff that you then start thinking, okay, well, if this hurts, then these are the muscles that support that joint, and I've lost all of that muscle, then I need to build it up. And, therefore these are the exercises, and, all of that sort of stuff. So I think that's really, really helps.
One thing I enjoyed in something you were saying there is about how you were going so hard on the bike that you felt like you could vomit. However, you thought about in the future how good you're going to be in a year's time. My question around that is, do you feel that generally, um, as a community, we err on the side of under exertion with exercise than over exertion? And have you ever felt that you've over exercised, or in your opinion, do you think that we should all be striving to be as absolutely as fit as possible and as strong as possible?
So I feel like I've certainly in those first few months, maybe over exercised on a fairly regular basis, and I think it's very easy to get excited when you start the I can do this now, and I'm the kind of person that just then takes it too far. But like I said, I've kind of learned from that. But I feel, and even when my knees first blew up, it's almost like your immediate reaction is, oh, well, I better rest. I need to put my feet up and, just relax. And that Christmas that I mentioned when I was, kind of falling apart, that's what I did. I spent the whole of that period just with my feet up, hoping that somehow the inflammation would just like drain. I don't know where it was going to be draining to, but I think very quickly it became apparent that that's not an answer. And I personally, right now, I think in terms of fitness, I'm probably, fitter than I was before any of this. I'm definitely lifting, I'd say maybe more weight than I was, but I'm lighter. And I do think that I've seen significant results from really, pushing it. And that's maybe not going to be the case for everyone. I don't know. But I think there's always a goal to beat in my head anyway. And once you've done something and maybe you've kind of scraped over the finish line and, it is exhausting, then it's like, okay, well, there needs to be then progression on that. And, with cycling in particular, you're kind of measured by something called FTP. And I can't even remember what it stands for, functional training percentage, something like that. And I started relatively low, and these numbers may mean nothing, but generally they'd say kind of double your body weight in kilograms, and that's usually a good starting place. So I was sort of hovering in and around the kind of 150 mark. That's now up to 250, and then that's great and that's hard. But then it's like, okay, well, Olympic cyclists are doing, like, I don't know, their thresholds are like 400 or close to 500. And then it's like, okay, well, there's still some room for improvement. So I think, obviously, I'm sort of a bit tongue in cheek there, but I think it's dangerous just to kind of settle and just be like, okay, that's enough now. I've reached my maximum. And of course, like with strength training, there's only ever going to be a certain amount that you can lift. But it's then thinking about, oh, okay, well, what's my form like? Am I really now just focusing in on the quality of what I'm doing? And in turn, that may increase to, okay, now I can push out an extra rep. And I think that kind of continuous improvement is always something that I'm kind of striving for with my approach to all of this.
Yeah, I love that. And I completely agree personally across the board with everything that you've just said there about this. I believe that we can always be striving for an improvement, even if our joints limit us to only very light weights and very low reps. We can work, as you said, on the quality of those reps. And then we might find that if we go and try a little bit of a different exercise that puts some emphasis on some of the supporting muscles, that we can come back to that other exercise and we may do another half rep or another rep and so on. So I do think that we should always be trying to do more, and it doesn't necessarily mean more weight, but just being able to demonstrate some improvements. It goes so far for mental health to see some improvements in our body when often we are consumed with things that are worsening with our body or worrying about our body. And then what I love is that there is almost no upward limit for fitness. So when you're talking about that that marker with regards to cycling, yeah, if we can, if it's not affecting the joints, then aiming for more and more endurance and fitness, then we're talking about cardiovascular health. And the studies are really clear on this. They make me laugh because the science is like in an area where they're never in any other area, which is there's no upper limit on how much fitness you can have that is beneficial for reduction of mortality. Like basically, as fit as you can get equals the lowest risk of mortality, right? So dying from any cause. So and you just don't see the sort of like the sort of guidelines around that. Normally they're very conservative and stuff with just about every other aspect in life, but with fitness, if you can go into elite zone, then your life is tending towards excellent longevity and health. So you've inspired me to get back on the bike. The things that come up with me, it's time consuming. It doesn't feel like it's kind of I think, it's maybe not strength building because it's more of really high reps as opposed to muscle development. But this is not true. If you do it enough, you build strength and obviously the endurance, and it is a wonderful use of time if it results in results like you've had. So I know it's not the full picture, it's just a part of it, but obviously it helps. And I utilized stationary bike tremendously when I was after our wedding. We went to the United States on a 2-month sort of post-wedding experience and stayed with my wife's family. And I went to the gym every single day and I was on that stationary bike every single day. And I was measuring how far I could walk. And each day I'd try, and my goal was to walk past the stop sign at the end of the street. And it was only, I want to say like 100 yards. No, I don't know why I said yards. I was in America, like maybe 70 meters or something. Without having to stop and adjust by sort of doing a quad stretch on my knee, because I just had to do that all the time. Anyway, by stationary bike every single day and walking every day, I was eventually able to walk twice around the lake, which was near their house, which was probably like a few kilometers without having to stop and adjust and stretch my quad. So it is a fabulous form of exercise. And around the time when I was trying to avoid a knee replacement in Florida a few years, 2 or 3 years ago, I went to the physio, and the first thing they wanted me to do is get on the stationary bike. Like after a calf muscle stretch, it's like stretch your calf muscles. Okay, now get on the stationary bike. So, I mean, a lot of arrows point to it, and I'm looking, and I still use it. I just don't. I just do very, very high resistance, intense sessions, so that my heart rate is beating out of my chest. But I'm also going to mix it up and do some more of what you've just described as well, because it's lovely to sweat, as you say. It's so therapeutic. We know from the science coming out of China that it reduces heavy metals and pesticide-based toxins from the body through sweat. So we know it's a therapeutic thing to be doing. And anyway, I just got on a bit of an excited rant about it because of what you were saying. What else do we need to know, Mike, before we wrap this up? Are there some things that we haven't said that you think are really important for people to know?
I think a lot of people go through the whole weight loss thing, which I know causes a lot of reaction from friends and family. You know, they look at you and just think, "Oh my God, you are in a bad way." And I think it's just ignoring all of that and thinking the weight will come back in time, and not needing to kind of rush to reintroduce foods and things just to kind of get back to that weight, because of what other people think. And I personally did, realize that people were looking at you thinking, what is wrong with this guy? Like, he looks seriously ill. And it will come in time. And I think that's something that definitely played on my mind for most of that period. But I'm kind of back towards my sort of previous body weight now, and it's been a year. So it will come in good time. Don't stress about it. And when you look in the mirror and look like somebody else, then yeah, it's all good. It's what's going on that inside's that matters the most.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. We all go through that. None of us are sort of impervious or invincible against that social impact, especially that make you feel like you're doing something wrong. Or because, as we've said on previous episodes, like, most people aren't thin in a otherwise fat and obese society unless they've got something seriously wrong with them, because so few of us ever make dietary choices that aren't indulgent. And so when someone's skinny, they're like, that person's dying or something, right? They can't possibly be just wanting to eat in a way that makes them look like that, right? So,
Yeah.
Or don't appreciate the cannibalistic effect on muscle tissue that inflammation has in parallel. And thirdly, the inability to do an adequate resistance training when your joints hurt like crazy. So a lot of things are all combining to cause us to struggle with weight maintenance. And as you say, the weight will come back, and it's easier to put weight back on than it is to reverse dysbiosis and get rid of inflammation. So we do the hard task first, and then we can work on the relatively easier task second.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing that it became sort of a bit of a ritual, but definitely would help in terms of reducing that stiffness and the real severe pain. I used to have like a hot bath, maybe in the evenings, and I'd actually listen to these podcasts as well. And I think just hearing, so one with the bath, once you're out, you kind of feel like, for a moment in time, slightly better again. And from there, I'd make sure that I wouldn't be sort of exerting myself. I'd take it easy before going to bed. And it was one way to sort of just calm the system before going to sleep. But the podcasts, I think, really helped in terms of that sort of belief, and hearing that other people have had great results, or on their way to achieving something. You can kind of get your mindset into, okay, this is going to be me, and it's just a matter of time, taking note of all of the things that work for people and trying them. Some things will work, some might not be for you. And yeah, I think belief is something that you've just got to hold on to, and it's a journey, but it will come, as long as you're making the right choices, and you're persistent and patient. I think that belief will come true.
It is so true. You have to picture yourself in that position, hear examples, just like you've said today, of your own experience, and they sit with you and they lift you, and you actually feel this sense of, you know what, I'm going to emulate some of these things. And for a period of time, it might be a day or it might be a few weeks, there is definitely an elevated sense of, I've got this, come on, get out of your head and get into it, whether it be the foods, the exercise, whether it be to set some goals, to picture a future for yourself, and indulge in that sense of, yep, there's something to this, I'm going for it. And and I believe you've done a wonderful job of paying that back now, and putting this out there for people to hopefully have that feeling from listening to your experience. So, Mike, thanks so much for sharing. Congratulations on an incredible transformation with your health, and good luck with all that will come from here, and everything that you want to achieve. I hope that your bike ride goes safely and successfully, and I look forward to getting an update from you when you sub yourself on for your short stint football match.
Amazing.
So
thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Really do. Thank you.